Right, as I'm sure some of you will see, this is a 59 Bonneville. I'm doing this and this together as a video because that is the first year of the Bonneville 59. That's a matching number bike that I built. It was a chopper. Luckily the frame wasn't hacked and I was able to find front end parts and mudguards and tank and all that sort of stuff. And because it was a matching number, engine and frame, I was able to then build it back to somewhere near what should be, you know, a reasonable example of a stock 59. This one I picked up years ago in 90. It's a 74 Bonneville 650, the very last month or two of the 650 Bonnevilles. Now a lot of people think 72 and the conical model front end was the last 650 Bonneville, but it wasn't. During the sit-in and all this sort of stuff, the factory workers were producing 73s and 4 Bonnevilles and Tigers, and they made a few of these out of leftover 650 parts. But essentially it's a T140 with a 9-stud top end, but it's factory stamped, and it's stamped September of 74, which is the second to last month. So they're only trickling out a few of these in the end. Basically they were concentrating on getting the T140 models going. Up and out the door, and this is just using a few leftover bits. So the primary, there's a triplex primary just like a T140. The disc brake front end is the same as the T140s. There's lots of stuff on it, like the rocker box is 6-bolt just like a T140. So everything on this is like a 74, 73, 4 right hand shift Bonneville T140, but it's a 650. Now, those of you who aren't too sure, it's pretty hard to argue. If you go look and you'll see history on them. When I first saw it I thought, oh yeah, 74 Bonnie, 73 Bonnie, whatever. But then I had a good look at it and thought, wow, I've never seen this before. So I picked it up. Now, given that it's a 5-speed, I did that article on 5-speeds. This is one of those early narrow gear 5-speeds, this model, like I was telling you about. I had to have it out one time because bush moved on one of the gears and tightened the mechanism up a bit, so Loctite the bush, shove it back in, and it's been good for years since. But it's been a great little bike. When I first got it, at a stuffed up main bearing on the right hand side, and that's when they went to the 5-speed. They went to an 8-ball 6306, I mean a 6306 8-ball bearing. I don't know why, but I put a high capacity 11-ball 6306, which I do with all my Nortons and all my Triumphs, strokers or otherwise, when they're a metric bearing on the timing side. I put some valve guides in it, left the valves, give the bore a hone, put a new set of rings on it, and put it back together. And I've done approximately 40,000 miles on the original 12. Now during that time I didn't have a speedo drive, but I drove it 15 mile each way for 3 years, and runs and rides. So I know it's probably close to 50,000 miles on this bike now. Since I pulled it out of storage a few years ago, I put a speedo drive on it and actually showed another 3,000 mile on the original 12. But you know, trips to parks and Maryborough and stuff like that. So it's actually got probably closer to 50,000 miles, and it's still on stock pistons. She is a little bit smoky again. It's probably due for a rebore, but I didn't even take the rods off the crank at 12,000 mile when I pulled the crank out and changed the main bearing, left the roller bearing in there. It has a little bit of a rattle, but it's not a big deal. I just fitted some new carbs on it. It hadn't been started for 6 years, and then fired it up the other day with some, well, they're not brand new, they're new bodies and slides and bits and pieces I found around the shop. And it's been a great little bike. It was my workhorse many years ago for 4 years, or 90 through 94, when I was doing a lot of miles on it. And I'd have bags on it and carting me junk to and from my shop, and it did some miles, this little thing, and it's been a good bike. I can't complain. Oil in frame, 650, 750 is one of the best things Triumph ever did. And like I say, with this one, I've put a couple of upgrades on it, like an oil filter and a primary belt drive. That's why there's no cover in the filler there on the primary. Aftermarket parts, which I really like. You know, you can see that's the a correct aftermarket crash bar. I really like that sort of stuff. Silly little things like the cat's eye tail light. The carburetor's on it are 389s. Blended the manifolds. They're a little bit bigger than they should be, but I've got the original carbs, which don't have, they're a chopped block. They're a monoblock style of carb, but they don't actually have a fuel capacity on them. They should be 2 chopped block carbs, which I've got in a box, and then they would normally then have a hanger in there that hang I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but a capacity, fuel capacity, a bowl. They would hang a bowl in there, kind of like an SU carb hanging off the side, those sort of side bowls, and it's hung off the frame. But anyway, and that's a little bit of a bodgy looking oil filter, but I do like oil filters. The tank, I don't have any knee pads. Now this tank, I had to find all sorts of stuff, and these guards are expensive and they're not real good. The guards on these things came out on the Tiger 110 in 58, continued through to 59 Tiger 110, and then 59 Bonneville the first year also had these big valance guards. But so they're running on 3 different models over 2 years, and boy are they expensive and hard to find. So my tank, every hole in that tank was weld filled, not just bronze or bog or anything else, but weld filled, and therefore trying to re-drill all the holes and tap all the holes, I managed to get the badges and the top tank grid done, drilled out and tapped. One of them did break through, and I've had to line the tank. And then at that point I got sick of trying to do it and forgot about the side covers. If I ever want, the knee pads, if I ever want to put knee pads on it, I'll just glue some on. I only built it as a rider, even though it's a matching number bike. It's sort of close, fairly good, but not perfect, and I'm not interested in any comments because I don't care. I built it for me and no one else. Now I've got, as you can see, the oil pressure gauge. It's a Stewart Warner, and the amp gauge. There would normally be an amp gauge in it, but because those Stewart Warners had a bezel that matched the Smith's gauge, I kind of like that idea. And there's a kill button in the middle. Normally there would be a rotary switch in place of that oil pressure gauge, but I think the oil pressure gauge is much more functional. I don't have a generator in it at the moment, but I don't ride it that much, and have a little total loss battery going on. You can see that, well, you could sort of see the competition mag in there. I probably could have put a new plate on it, but I didn't. Anyway, it hasn't done a lot of miles, but the ones that I do have, I have done, it's actually quite impressive just how well a little 650 twin carb gets along. I owned a TR6 and rode it for 5 years back in the middle 80s, late 80s, and it was a great little bike, but this thing definitely has more poke than it. Probably similar to the blue bike there in the amount of grunt that it's got. So, but anyway, and I don't normally show, I may have said this, but I don't normally show matching number bikes. I could give a shit really, because everybody else on the internet does. But because this is the first year 650 and that is the last year 650 Bonneville that was ever made, I just thought people might be interested in the progression from there to there. This is a pretty looking bike, no doubt, but that is way more rideable. Anyway, hope you garnered some knowledge out of this, or not, it's up to you if you like it or not, but I really did like that thing there when I rode it a lot, and I've just dragged it out recently to start riding it again because it was a real good bike for me. Anyway, thanks very much for watching.